Russian-Ukrainian battlefield has witnessed intense and breathless confrontations, with countless human and material losses. Russia uses Lancet loitering munitions to destroy the M109 Paladin self-propelled howitzer provided by the US to Ukraine. How did 30,000 Ukrainian troops pierce through Russia's defense line with a series of minefields and dragon's teeth? According to the Tatar leader, Ukraine is accumulating special weapons to regain control of Crimea. Daily Mail unveils the secrets behind the US-trained Ukrainian Special Forces unit in a new video. US officials to discuss with Asian and European countries ways to counter Russia's efforts to evade sanctions. Japanese foreign minister declares, G7 is determined to defend the international order. US and Japan reaffirm commitment to cooperate on dealing with China and North Korea. Japan and South Korea hold high-level security talks for the first time in 5 years. Germany pledges to support mineral-rich countries in reducing dependence on China. Tesla Shanghai factory workers cry for help after bonus cuts. Singapore demands banks to keep foreign funding sources confidential. Tunisia, female drummers keep the traditional flame alive for Ramadan fasting month. The Russian army destroyed the American self-propelled guns M109 Paladin during a special operation in the Donbass. During the special operation in the Donbass, the Russian armed forces continue to strike at the enemy along the front line. The Ukrainian military is distributing video materials with destroyed equipment, showing the defeat of the American 155mm self-propelled artillery mount ACS, M109 Paladin and infantry fighting vehicle. According to reports, the Russian army attacked the American M109 Paladin self-propelled guns using the Lancet kamikaze unmanned aerial vehicle in the Kupiansk region. The impact caused an explosion of ammunition, which led to the destruction of the artillery mount to pieces. Video footage of the destroyed equipment was published by war correspondents. The destruction of the American self-propelled guns M109 Paladin testifies to the increase in power and effectiveness of the Russian army during the special operation in the Donbass. In turn, this confirms the need to continue the operation to eliminate the threat in eastern Ukraine and stabilize the situation in the region. The M109 Paladin SPG is an American 155mm self-propelled artillery mount, SPG, designed to support troops on the battlefield. It is one of the most widespread and successful artillery systems in the world, having been widely used during a number of conflicts since the 1960s. The M109 Paladin has a cropped turret mounted on a tracked chassis. The main armament consists of a 155mm howitzer with a firing range of up to 30 km, depending on the modification and the projectiles used. Secondary armament is represented by a 12.7mm M2HB machine gun for defense against ground and air targets. According to the Financial Times, US analysts explained that Ukraine's upcoming counteroffensive could be very difficult given Russia's readiness and Ukraine's lack of air superiority. But is there any way for more than 35,000 Ukrainian troops to fight with more than 100,000 Russian troops, overcome a series of minefields, dragon teeth? Please continue to monitor the program to find out. On one side there will be about 35,000 Ukrainian troops, supported by Western battle tanks. They will face more than 140,000 enemy troops along the 950 kilometers long front line. Separating the two forces would be deadly barricades with mines, earthen fortifications, and Russian tank posts. The day is coming when Ukraine will try to break through the Russian frontline fortifications. Success or failure will shape the battlefield and determine the strength of Kyiv in any final negotiations with Moscow to resolve the conflict. However, according to Pravda, analysts and military officials warn the fight promises to be complicated. First, breakout operations are complex, requiring the simultaneous work of all military units, from artillery and tanks to intelligence collectors and engineers. Moreover, Ukraine's lack of air superiority would make the fighting more difficult. The last time Western tanks met the Soviet T-72 in Iraq was in 2003, but at that time the US-led coalition had an overwhelming advantage in air power. Ukraine also lacks air support to thwart attacks by Russian warplanes, the newspaper wrote. The classic approach in a ground attack is to rush into the enemy's rear, in one or more areas, and deliver a concentrated hit to the enemy's center of gravity. Successful examples without air superiority are rare, said Ben Barry, a former British soldier. The media noted that the exact location of the attack is still a secret. However, one of the strategically important regions for Russia is Melitopol, located near the Sea of Azov. But the Russian military has prepared defensive lines in this area, according to Pravda. According to military analysts, the Russian defense system usually consists of a minefield, followed by rows of concrete pyramids called dragon teeth to slow down the movement of tanks and artillery. Behind them was another minefield, another 400 minutes later a fence, and 500 m behind an anti-tank moat. According to former British soldier Barry, Ukraine first needed to clear the minefield to get past tanks and equipment, then destroy the dragon's teeth, possibly with a tank equipped with a plow, and finally cross the ditch with a plow. Special equipment for creating bridges. The most challenging thing was to synchronize the actions of the different units and the Ukrainian army. However, analysts say it can conduct small-scale maneuvers and has little experience in combined armed operations of this scale. In addition, according to the Financial Times, the Ukrainian army, having lost a significant part of its experienced force, is said to have lost up to 120,000 men. However, the Ukrainian military has been underestimated before, such as when they defied Western military assessments last year and pushed back Russian forces around the capital and then the city of Kharkiv in the northeast. Russia has also lost almost twice as many troops since the conflict broke out, according to Western estimates. Moreover, the Ukrainian army is better equipped and trained than their enemies. Former British Army officer Glenn Grant was convinced that if the Ukrainian offensive was brutal and swift, the front would be shaken, the Russians would flee and defensive structures would become unnecessary. Russia has built many fortifications in the north of Crimea, in the districts of Krasnoperkopsk and Zankoy, Crimean Tatar leader Chibarov said. There are entire hubs of such fortifications. Experts have different opinions on why they have been doing this, but it is unlikely that the entry of the armed forces of Ukraine into occupied Ukraine will look like a frontal assault, as was the case during the Second World War. According to him, Ukraine is currently accumulating special, high-precision weapons that will be used to destroy specific targets, as military experts have predicted. To deprive Russian troops of control over Crimea, certain targets have been chosen: the bridge across the Kerch Strait, the Russian Black Sea Fleet's military ships, and powerful ammunition depots, Chibarov revealed. It is known where they are located, particularly near Zankoy. Last year, one such depot was blown up. This is to block the overland corridor from the occupied Crimea through parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia oblasts, which are also currently occupied, to the territory of Russia. The head of the Mejlis added that these targets are being closely monitored by the armed forces of Ukraine. Earlier, in an interview with the Financial Times, Presidential Deputy Chief of Staff Andriy Sybiha stated that Ukraine is ready to begin talks on Crimea once the armed forces of Ukraine reach the administrative border of the peninsula. However, Kyiv does not rule out the possibility of liberation by the forces of our army. On February 24, President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated that negotiations with Moscow are only possible after Russian invasion forces leave Ukrainian territory and cease attacking Ukrainian citizens. MC, footage of a top-secret commando unit within Ukraine's elite border force has emerged online, offering a rare glimpse into their operations as they join the fight against Russia's invading forces. Known as the DOZO Art Unit, the Ukrainian Special Force is not your typical group of border guards. The unit, officially named the 10th Mobile Border Detachment, is selected from the most elite troops within Ukraine's militarized state border guard service, or civilians that are deemed fit, strong, and skilled enough to pass the demanding entry tests. Founded in 2002, DOZR is tasked with carrying out clandestine missions to protect Ukraine from threats posed along its expansive borders that span a total 7,000 miles, including a long stretch of coast. With Belarus to the north, the Black Sea to the south, and Russia dominating its eastern boundaries, Ukraine has for years fielded threats from its enemies. In February 2022, Putin ordered his forces to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine with the goal of overthrowing the pro-Western government in Kyiv and replacing it with a pro-Russia puppet government more amenable to Moscow's will. Since then, DOZR unit has been actively fighting against the Russia invaders, and while little is known about the specifics of their operations, a picture of the unit can be pieced together from its limited public profile. The 10th Mobile Border Detachment, also known as the 10th Separate Operational Response Detachment (DOSR), is assigned tasks by the State Border Service. According to information in Ukraine, these tasks will be to fulfill missions deemed most high risk, often requiring an armed and forceful response. As a result, Ukraine has a huge border force made up of some 53,000 people, including 45,000 military personnel. Among them, the DOSR unit is considered the best of the best. According to risk intelligence firm Sibylline, prior to the full-scale invasion, the U.S. was actively involved in supporting, training and outfitting DOSR units, including through donations of tactical equipment as well as maritime patrol craft. Some videos released online have shown the unit taking part in the fight for Bakhmut, the war's longest and bloodiest battle so far, likened to a First World War meat grinder. The Pacific Fleet's Surprise Combat Readiness Inspection practiced the preparedness of strategic missile-carrying submarines for employing their weapons, Defense Minister Army General Sergei Shoigu reported to Russian President Supreme Commander-in-Chief Vladimir Putin on Monday. The Pacific Fleet's forces are carrying out the second stage of the drills. The naval task force set up in a distant maritime area is transiting to the southern part of the Sea of Okhotsk, accomplishing the objectives of combat maneuvering and ferreting out the underwater situation, the defense chief said. The Pacific Fleet's forces have practiced the issues of the combat sustainability of strategic missile-carrying submarines and their preparedness for employing their weapons. An air defense tactical exercise has begun. Naval aircraft are involved to simulate enemy forces, Shoigu reported. Pacific Fleet warships staged an anti-submarine warfare exercise and artillery firing against sea and air targets in the Sea of Japan during the SNAP drill, TASS reports. Warships had departed from home bases early morning and arrived in the designated practicing areas in the Sea of Japan. They performed tactical maneuvering and practiced all kinds of defense for a sea force during the sea voyage. The Admiral Panteleev large anti-submarine ship and the Marshal Shaposhnikov frigate completed firing from 100mm and 30mm artillery pieces against sea and air targets. Ship crews practiced search and destruction of a mock enemy submarine after that. Ka-27PL helicopters with dip sonars took off from ships. The two 142M3 long-range ASW aircraft also arrived in the exercise area. The large anti-submarine ship completed a salvo of depth-charge rocket against coordinates reported by pilots. U.S. Treasury Department officials will travel to Austria, Germany, Italy, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Switzerland later this month to discuss efforts to counter the evasion of anti-Russian sanctions, the Treasury said in a press release on Sunday. According to the document, Under-Secretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence Brian Nelson will visit Switzerland on April 16 to 18, Italy on April 19, Austria on April 20 to 21 and Germany on April 21 to 22. Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing and Financial Crimes Elizabeth Rosenberg's schedule includes trips to Kazakhstan on April 23 to 26 and to Kyrgyzstan on April 27 to 28. The two officials will continue the Treasury Department's work countering the evasion of anti-Russian sanctions. U.S. agencies will seek to deny businesses that provide material support to Russia's special military operation access to the world's most important markets, the Treasury said. The United States has imposed sanctions on companies in over 20 countries, targeting sanctions evasion networks, it added. Japan's Foreign Minister Hayashi Yoshimasa says he wants to show the world that the Group of 7 nations are determined to protect the international order based on the rule of law. Hayashi made the remarks on Monday during the second day of the G7 foreign ministers meeting in the resort town of Karuizawa in central Japan. In the morning, the ministers discussed the situation in the Indo-Pacific region and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Hayashi, who is chairing the meeting, said the world is facing a turning point. He stressed that the G7 nations oppose any unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force, referring to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its threat to use nuclear weapons. Foreign ministers of the Group of 7, G7, agree to continue keeping sanctions against Russia, supporting Ukraine and cooperating for the purpose of strengthening control over compliance of restrictions, according to the statement of event organizers received by TASS. Furthermore, they concurred into reinforcing coordination to prevent and respond to evasion of sanctions as well as third-party weapon supply to Russia, the statement reads. Hayashi also said the G7 nations are prepared to address the various issues faced by the emerging and developing nations collectively known as the Global South. The ministers are expected to exchange opinions over lunch on how to support these nations. Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken are expected to reaffirm bilateral cooperation in dealing with North Korea's repeated ballistic missile launches during their talks Monday, according to a Japanese government official. The meeting, on the sidelines of a Group of 7 foreign ministerial meeting in the central Japan town of Karuizawa, will also touch on the regional situation involving China, as well as the Japan-U.S. alliance's deterrence capabilities. We would like the ministers to affirm the alignment between Japan and the United States on a range of issues, the official said. The security situation in the Indo-Pacific region remains tense, with China continuing its military buildup and pushing its territorial claims in the East and South China Seas, and North Korea continuing to test missiles. North Korea on Thursday launched a ballistic missile toward the Sea of Japan, with the country's official media saying it was a new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile propelled by a 3-stage rocket system. Japan, the United States and South Korea have condemned Pyongyang's nuclear and missile development programs, and agreed to step up efforts to realize real-time information sharing about North Korean missiles. South Korea and Japan held a joint meeting of senior diplomats and defense officials here on Monday, the first such talks since March 2018, Seoul's foreign ministry said, amid signs of a slow thaw in bilateral ties. The Director General level policy consultation meeting came after South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida agreed last month to mend ties soured by historical disputes and step up security cooperation in the wake of North Korea's escalating provocations. The so-called 2+2 meeting brought together Seo Min-young, Director General for Asia and Pacific Affairs at the Foreign Ministry, and Woo Kyung-suk, Deputy Director General for International Policy at the Defense Ministry, as well as their Japanese counterparts Takahiro Funakoshi, Director General of Asian and Oceanian Affairs, and Atsushi Ando, Deputy Director General of the Defense Policy Bureau. During the session, the two sides are expected to share their assessment of the security situation in Northeast Asia and on the Korean Peninsula, and their respective defense and security policies. The two countries' leaders agreed in a summit in Tokyo last month to resume various government dialogue channels that had been suspended amid strained ties due to historical disputes stemming from Japan's colonization of the Korean Peninsula from 1910 to 45. The joint consultation meeting was launched in 1998 after an agreement between the two countries' foreign ministers a year earlier. MC, the 75th Hanover Mess was ceremoniously opened on Sunday evening, April 16, as Indonesian President Joko Widodo, whose country is this year's partner country of the industrial show, joined German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to pledge future economic cooperation and enjoy an Indonesian-themed opening show. Germany wants to help countries that are rich in critical minerals such as Indonesia to cut dependency on China. German Chancellor said that as Asia moved more and more center stage, Indonesia would grow in global importance. Germany wants to help countries that are rich in critical minerals such as Chile, Indonesia and Namibia to build their own processing infrastructure to cut dependency on China, Chancellor Olaf Scholz said on stage on Sunday. Berlin is trying to rebalance its relationship with China and reduce reliance on Asia's powerhouse for key inputs, such as nickel and other critical minerals. If we succeed in locating more processing steps where the raw materials are in the ground, then that will not only create greater local prosperity. We will ensure that we have more than just one supplier in the future, Scholz said in a speech at the Industrial Trade Fair Hanover Messe. Scholz said he supported a free trade agreement between the European Union and Indonesia, which the two parties have been negotiating since 2016. I am committed to ensuring that we finally get this agreement across the finish line now, he said, adding that geopolitical developments in Europe and in Asia argued for similar deals with other countries such as Mexico and Australia, Kenya and India. This year's Hanover Messe is taking place under the guiding theme of Industrial Transformation, Making the Difference. Over the next few days in Lower Saxony, around 4,000 companies from the mechanical engineering, electrical and digital industries as well as the energy sector will be showcasing their latest technologies and solutions for a networked climate-neutral industry. Workers from Tesla. Oh, Shanghai factory are taking to social media to appeal to Elon Musk and the Chinese public after being informed over the weekend about planned cuts to their performance bonuses, according to online posts and workers. Posts from online users began appearing on forums such as Baidu Tieba late last week. Some took to Twitter, owned by Musk and blocked in China, to tweet to Elon Musk, his mother May Musk, and Tesla's accounts. Please pay attention to the performance bonus of frontline workers at Tesla's Shanghai factory being arbitrarily deducted, said one post on Twitter in a reply to a tweet from Musk about a SpaceX launch. Two workers told Reuters they were informed by their supervisors over the weekend about a cut to their quarterly bonus payout, which is linked to the factory's performance. They said Tesla supervisors mentioned a safety incident when asked about reasons for the bonus cut. Several online posts claimed workers at the Shanghai plant were being unfairly punished for an incident this year at a factory where one worker is alleged to have died. A Tesla worker died in a factory floor accident earlier this year, four people with knowledge of the incident told Reuters. Reuters could not independently confirm details of the accident. Tesla and Elon Musk did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Regulators in Singapore have asked banks not to discuss the origins of large amounts of wealth flowing into the country over the past year, due to the booming presence of rich Chinese nationals, the Financial Times reported on Friday. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, the country's central bank, gave the tacit directive during a banking sector meeting in February, the outlet claimed, citing multiple sources who attended. The regulator did not mention China by name, but noted that growth in fund flows was being driven by high-net-worth individuals from different regions, the FT's sources said. Singapore boasts a huge financial services sector and is sometimes dubbed the Switzerland of Asia, due to its efforts to strike a neutral stance amid tensions between China and the US. The city-state has been named the world's best place to do business for 15 consecutive years by the Economist Intelligence Unit. Many wealthy Chinese see it as a safe place to park their assets, amid the crackdown on corruption in their home country. The wealth flow from China into Singapore has become a politically sensitive issue on the island, driving up the cost of living for locals. According to a report by Al Jazeera last month, buyers from mainland China accounted for nearly a quarter of luxury home sales in the city-state in 2022, outnumbering US citizens by more than 2 to 1. The number of so-called family offices, which private wealth management firms set up for rich individuals and their relatives, has exploded in Singapore over the past few years, with a large chunk of them from China, the FT writes. A SpaceX rocket system described by a former astronaut as potentially being completely revolutionary is scheduled for its first complete test flight on Monday, April 17, morning. The massive Starship rocket will launch from SpaceX's Starbase facilities in Boca Chica, Texas. Former NASA astronaut and a senior SpaceX advisor, Garrett Reisman told Reuters that the rocket is a game-changer for a number of reasons. SpaceX is hoping to carry humans to much further distances inside our solar system, Reisman said. A lot more humans at one time. And also do it much more cost-effectively, not only humans, but also taking cargo up to space, satellites, space telescopes. So, they're trying to kind of break the mold on a lot of different fronts. The test mission will mark the first launch of SpaceX's fully stacked, 394-foot, 120-meter, tall Starship rocket system, consisting of a Starship rocket sitting atop a Super Heavy first-stage booster with 33 rocket engines. Unusually, Starship is constructed of stainless steel and uses methane gas as propellant, whereas most rockets use hydrogen. Its sheer size and the potential for the craft to be fully reusable are what make it such major step forwards, said Reisman, who is a professor of astronautical engineering at the University of Southern California. I can't emphasize enough how big this rocket is, said Reisman. If you compare it to the rocket that NASA just launched, the SLS rocket. The SLS rocket was the biggest rocket we've ever successfully flown. It was 8 million pounds of thrust. The Starship and the Super Heavy booster that they're going to try to launch tomorrow, that has 17 million pounds of thrust in the first stage. The rocket system is expected to deploy the Starship's second stage into space, where it will complete a full orbit before re-entering Earth's atmosphere and splashing down dozens of miles off a coast in Hawaii. The Super Heavy booster will attempt a landing in Texas near its launch site. SpaceX says Starship will be a fully reusable transportation system to carry crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, Mars, and beyond. Right now, when we launch Crew Dragon, we could take 4 people in there up to the space station. Starship, theoretically, could carry maybe as many as 100 people at a time, Reisman said. But Reisman said there are numerous challenges to be overcome for a successful test flight. SpaceX has test-launched the Starship booster 5 times, but those tests involved the booster launching just 6 miles above ground before attempting to land vertically on land. All but the final 5th test ended in explosions. After the successful landing on the 5th try, SpaceX began work toward Monday's big test launch of the fully stacked system. In 2021, the Special Criminal Court of Colombia said that in the 6 years from 2002 to 2008, the country's army had killed many innocent civilians for achievements in the war with armed groups. Mothers of young men and teenagers who were victims of extrajudicial killings by the Colombian army paid tribute to their children on Sunday, April 16, to commemorate 15 years since the killings. Relatives gathered in the main square of Socha, central Colombia, where through art, they remembered the victims and demanded justice. The country's Transitional Justice Court says at least 6,402 people were killed and falsely presented as rebels between 2002 and 2008 during the Colombian conflict. I ask God to allow us to find out what happened to our children. Why did they kill them? What did they do to make the army do this horrible thing to them when the army is the one who is supposed to take care of us, not to kill them in this way? Colombia's 5-decade war pitted leftist rebels against government forces and right-wing paramilitary groups. Some 200,000 people were killed, 7 million displaced and 60,000 listed as missing, according to government figures. The country's Special Jurisdiction for Peace, JEP, tribunal is investigating possible war crimes and rights abuses known as the so-called false positives, a scandal that rocked Colombia in the late 2000s where army units were found to have killed civilians and listed them as guerrillas killed in combat to inflate casualty numbers. Last year, former members of the Colombian army acknowledged their role in the extrajudicial killings of thousands of people committed by the country's armed forces. Indonesian military on Sunday, April 16, said one of its personnel was killed in a crossfire with separatist rebels in the Papua region. The exchange of fire happened when troops were combing near a location where they believe a New Zealand pilot is being held, military spokesperson Julius Wijijono said in a news conference in the Indonesian capital Jakarta. He added that the weather condition is the biggest hindrance to the operation to rescue the pilot who was kidnapped by the rebels in February this year. Earlier, a spokesperson from the West Papua National Liberation Army, TPNPB, said they have killed 9 army personnel after Jakarta did not respond to a request for negotiations. A low-level battle for independence from Indonesia has continued for decades in the remote and resource-rich Papua region, with analysts saying the conflict between armed rebels and security forces had intensified significantly in recent years. An Australian businessman has been refused bail after being charged with a foreign interference offence for accepting cash from suspected Chinese intelligence agents, with a Sydney court saying on Monday, April 17, his close ties to China made him a flight risk. Magistrate Michael Barco said Alexander Sergo was a sophisticated, worldly businessperson who had been on the radar of Australian intelligence for some time. The prosecution had a strong case against Sergo, who had lived in China for decades, Barco said in refusing bail. A marketing executive, Sergo, 55, was arrested in the beachside suburb of Bondi on Friday and is the second person charged under Australia's foreign interference law, which criminalises activity that helps a foreign power interfere with Australia's sovereignty or national interest. It carries a maximum 15-year prison sentence. Sergo's lawyer, Bernard Caleri, had sought bail, saying the reports Sergo had written were based on publicly sourced information and the case against his client was shallow and unsubstantiated. Caleri told media outside the court the case was a civil liberties issue. Sergo is alleged to have arrived back in Australia this year with a shopping list of intelligence priorities he had been asked for by 2 people he had suspected since 2021 to be agents for China's Ministry of State Security, the court heard. The pair were named in court only as Ken and Evelyn. This shopping list had been discovered by Australian intelligence authorities, the court was told. Sergo had been allegedly asked to handwrite reports about Australia's AUKUS defence technology partnership with the United States and Britain, the Quad Diplomatic Partnership, iron ore and lithium mining, Barco said. The African Union's Peace and Security Council held an emergency meeting on April 16 to discuss worrying developments in Sudan. The council said it strongly opposes any outside interference, which could further complicate the situation. Many regional and world powers, including the US, China, Russia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia along with the United Nations, the European Union and the African Union, have called for an immediate end to the conflicts. Hostilities in Sudan. Egypt and South Sudan on April 16 offered to mediate between the Sudanese army and the RSF paramilitary forces. Specifically, according to Reuters, after a phone call between Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his South Sudanese counterpart Salva Kiir on April 16, Sudan's two most influential neighbors urged efforts to restore peace. A joint statement by Egypt and South Sudan called on the parties in Sudan to choose the voice of reason and peaceful dialogue. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry says the United States needs to work with Japan and other countries to speed up research and development into the practical use of hydrogen, a key energy source that the world may come to rely on. NHK interviewed Kerry following the Group of 7 Ministers meeting on climate, energy and environment. Kerry said the meeting was very constructive but we still need to do more. He referred to an agreement made at the meeting to make efforts to cut carbon dioxide emissions of automobiles in half by 2035 or earlier relative to the level in 2000. Emission volumes are calculated based on the number of vehicles in each of the countries. He said Japan and the US could probably cooperate on it but that it will be helpful to both of us not to be spending the same money and chasing the same result. Kerry said countries around the world need to make key decisions on measures to fight climate change within about 6 to 8 years. He said, "This is the biggest economic transformation in our history since the time of the Industrial Revolution. And nobody should be scared of it." He went on to say Hokkaido and other places can contribute enormously to this process, with the choices they make on energy sources. During the times of technology, an old Ramadan tradition that is slowly dying. Even so, the role of drummers waking up observant Muslims to have their overnight suhoor, the last meal before the day's fast, is still important. Reuters reported that at every dawn during the Muslim month of Ramadan, Tunisian Munira Kilani gets out around 3 a.m. in the morning, walking the streets and called out, "Wake up for suhoor," for people to wake up and eat before they start fasting. "We are not eating meat nor chicken like other people do. When we are able to get vegetables, that is great." Kilani learned it from her father. She never thought she would follow in his footsteps. According to Reuters, this work is usually for men, but under difficult circumstances, a salary of more than $80 will help the 50-year-old woman provide for her family and support her sick brother. "With this job, I can work and help everyone in my family. I am happy for that," Munira Kilani said. More than 20,000 runners from over 17 countries and regions hit the streets of East China's Yangzhou city on Sunday as the 2023 Yangzhou Jianjin Marathon returned after being suspended for 3 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The event is named to honor Jianjin, a Chinese monk who was born in Yangzhou during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907, and traveled to Japan to spread Buddhism. The 2023 Yangzhou Jianjin Half Marathon started from the Yangzhou Marathon Park and ended at the Sanwan Eco-Cultural Park of the Grand Canal, with a total length of 21.0975 kilometers. While competing each other in the race, the participants can also enjoy the beautiful scenery along the way, as the route covers several landmarks of Yangzhou, a hot tourist destination.